Hi everybody, welcome to the next installment of IndieBiz EDU, and today we're talking about all things email marketing. I've been told it's not dead. You don't have to do everything on social media. You can still use your email, like those of us that started in the marketing field before social media was available. So I'm excited to have these two speakers. We're here at Cloudport, so thank you to Cloudport for hosting us again, and of course, thank you to Gorham Savings Bank for sponsoring this whole series and making it possible to offer for free to our members and non-members alike. So with that, I'm going to let our speakers introduce themselves, starting with Rich.
My name is Rich Brooks. I'm the president of Flight New Media. Been doing this for 26 years. Before there even was email marketing, there was always email, but there was no email marketing. And I also run the Agents of Change, which is a weekly digital marketing podcast and annual conference that we're bringing back this year in October. Very excited to have an in-person event in a post-COVID world.
And I'm Ellen Durr, and I'm a marketing strategist at Vaunt Performance Digital Marketing in Westbrook. So I work with clients on customer journey mapping and persona development, and I also handle our email program. So yeah, I'm really excited to dive into email marketing today.
Excellent. Well, let's dive in. But before we do, I want you both to tell me what was the last local business that you spent money on, and why do you love them?
I think it was yesterday at lunch, and I went to Anthony's, and I love it because Tony always has the warmest greeting for you, always makes you feel like Norm when you walk in, like Norm from Cheers. And I'm addicted to both their eggplant parm and their meatball subs.
Sounds delicious.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my anniversary was yesterday, so the last place I spent money was at Barfuto, which is delicious. Their crispy eggplant is way too addictive. And of course, being that it was my anniversary, we've spent money on our dog. So Uncommon Paws got the second transaction that night, and they were awesome.
And they happen to be a member of Portland Buy Local.
Excellent.
As well. Great. So first question is, all right, going back to what I was talking about, in the age of social media, or now it's not even, I don't know what the age is now. It was probably the age of social media several years ago, and now it's something else. Can't keep up. So you're going to help us do that. But where does email fit in now?
Me first. I think that email marketing has become, it never stopped being critical. And I think it's even more critical today. I've had the pleasure of meeting people who are like Instagram experts and Facebook ads experts, and all of these people who basically set themselves out as gurus and experts in social media. But the number one thing that they care about is list building and getting their email list up, because they know that that's the one place that you can, even though, yes, it may end up in a junk folder or whatever the case is, that's where they can have those one-on-one conversations and really be able to build up their business way more than any current social media platform can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say that as an agency, we use email very much as part of a holistic marketing plan. So it's a piece of the puzzle that will help you, convert prospects into customers. And like Rich was saying, I think it's really a unique way to really get in contact with the customer, have those conversations with them, be able to explore your brand in detail with them, but also get to know them and their needs better. And so it all just sort of like clicks into place and works together. So I'd say it's a really important part of that whole.
Right. So I have a website and I have social media. Right? So why should I then bother with email marketing? Do I need to do that too? I only have time to do 2, 3, or 5 things a day, right?
Yeah, so email's always an interesting conversation to have with clients, because a lot of times they're concerned about having to develop the content for the emails and keep things fresh and interesting with them. But I think, if you look at it as a way to repurpose content. So you can take content that's on your website, you can tweak it a little bit, massage it, and then put that back into your emails. And so you get this really consistent experience across both your website, your email, your social media, if you're doing shorter pieces of content there. But it's all important. So it all works together. But I always advise clients to just find the content that they can kind of tweak a little bit and replug back into their emails.
I think Ellen brings up a great point. It is so much work to come up with really valuable, important content that your customers and prospects are going to care about. So once you figure out what that content is, whether you can blog once a month or you're creating a podcast or a video, you don't want to just put it out there and hope for the best. Like email marketing, developing a subscriber list, people who want to hear from you, who care what you have to say, is critically important to keep on getting that message out there. And it's just one channel. I mean, we obviously talk about social, we talk about website, other channels, but this is a channel that is going to be seen by a lot of people. And it's about creating engaging content and building your list. And I'm sure we'll talk about those things as time goes on. But I found it to be one of the most engaging lists. And also, it's a great place to sell. I mean, the bottom line is sometimes people come to our website somewhere on their customer journey. They are just in the information gathering stage. But if we can get them to join our email newsletter, we can continue to sell to them, bring them along the customer journey. And ultimately, that's where you start to close those sales, is in those emails. So I think it's a critical piece. Whatever your main content creation is, whether you're mostly posting to Facebook or Instagram, whether you're mostly blogging, podcasting, YouTube, the email is that critical piece. And it's not the only piece, but it's a piece. There are very few businesses that I've ever said, I don't think you need an email newsletter.
Yeah.
And that's not true with any other social media platform out there. There's a few businesses like, say, wedding planners, where hopefully they only work with that person once, right? But even then, I could argue that maybe an auto drip campaign or some other email marketing tactic would be helpful. But for almost every other business, B2B, B2C, e-commerce, like staying in front of your customers is incredibly important, and getting permission to be in their inbox where there's less competition, I think, is incredibly important and something every business should strive for.
Yeah.
So that makes me think of another question around content. So where do you start? So you have a message you have to get out. Do you start with crafting the email and then start chunking it up for your blog and your social?
So I will typically start with a wireframing process. So I will just develop basically like very large scale outlines for my email sequence or for my campaign or for my newsletter. So you basically would just start out with, what do you want your title, your subject to be? Then you go heading by heading. You think about the assets that you want to put in that email. So say what photos, what piece of video, or what link to your website do you want to include within that email? So start there, and then you can fill in the details in between. And that's where you really start to bring in sort of the longer form copy part of the email. So yeah, that's where I would start.
We have 2 email newsletters that we put out, and of course we work with our clients on a lot of their email newsletters, sometimes creating the content. It really depends on what type of business you're in and how you communicate with your audience. But for Agents of Change, which is a weekly podcast, we are basically, I am writing it as myself, and I'm talking about what went on in the interview that I did. So if it's about email marketing, or if it's about AI, I kind of talk a little bit about that. And I also try and personalize it. I've started to include stories of what's going on in my life, photos of my nascent gardening skills, and to try and give it a personality. And so in that case, the podcast drives the content and the email is just a summary. When we're blogging, it's very similar. We're starting with what's the content we want to put out to help the customer journey, which hopefully leads back to our website. And then the email, comes from that. So we're usually teasing or teeing up whatever the content is. So if we're doing something on Google Ads, we might talk a little bit about Google Ads, some of the challenges or some of the opportunities, and then here's the blog post that we talk about it. So we're using email almost as a gateway to that bigger piece of content. But if we were an e-commerce store, I'd be sending out emails once a week, 3 times a week, depending on what my audience wanted, talking about the latest sales, whatever it might be. So it really does depend on, and so that's a lot more driven by the items in your store, the items in your inventory. So it really depends on the company, I think.
I would say too, it also depends on the types of emails that you're sending. So you could do a newsletter, or we do a lot of drip campaigns for our clients. So before I sit down and even start wireframing, I always think of the overarching strategy of the campaign or the overarching strategy of the newsletter. What do I want to achieve from it? What benefit is it going to have for our clients to present content and information in this way? And then use that to kind of plan out from there those wireframes, and then delving into the next layer of copy.
So maybe set up a marketing campaign for me and just talk about, where is email being slotted in? You kind of touched on it, but with the wireframe, but let's go even broader.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is not to get marketing jargony here, but probably a lot
That's
of
what
you.
we're talking about.
Yes. But a lot of you probably heard of the concept of the marketing funnel, which is essentially a way that we think of how to move someone from, general awareness of your business to becoming an actual customer. So when we sit down and we think about building a marketing plan for a client, we want to start with your wider ranging awareness tactics like your digital advertising, your social, something where you can reach a wide variety of people that could potentially become customers, but you're not necessarily going into a lot of detail. You just want to give them an impression of your brand as quickly as possible. And then once they become interested, maybe they click on one of those ads, they click on a social media post, then you can bring them closer and further down into the funnel. And that's where you can really start having those meaningful conversations. So I look at email as a mid to low funnel tactic. So once they hit my website and they start looking around, say they want to put in their contact information to receive a piece of content. This is a common way that you can collect leads from your website. So you would offer up, say, a listicle of top 10 digital marketing tactics or something like that. They can subscribe to that, using their email address, and then they start receiving those emails. And once you can start that conversation, you can kind of narrow it down to the point where hopefully they'll eventually become a customer. But I look at it as definitely like a great way to have a more in-depth conversation after they've gotten a reasonable impression of your brand. And we use it a lot for. We work with a lot of higher ed clients, so another way we would use it too is to just think about how to grasp onto the student's attention, and after they've even been admitted to the school, how do you get them to pick your school above all of the other schools that they might have been accepted to? So it's kind of an interesting dynamic.
Give me a company or give me an industry and I'll see if I can't create something on the fly for you.
First one, here we got jewelry, right? Yeah. Jewelry retail.
So for jewelry retail, I mean, this is something that I feel the email is going to be primarily transactional. You're looking to sell product here, as opposed to me where I'm trying to educate a client along the way. So I would be, and I don't know how many pieces you have and how many are custom, but typically if you're a smaller shop, if you're a creator yourself, I'd also want to tell the story behind the piece. So I might do a weekly or a monthly newsletter that features one piece that I created and talk about how did I come up with this idea? Was I walking the beaches in Maine and I saw a shell that made me think about a new design or a new thing? Or what's the story of how I got the silver or the gold? Is there some giant store that I go to? Or is it locally sourced? I don't think there's any gold mines in Maine, but you get the point. And so kind of telling that story, because I've always said, especially around jewelry, there's always going to be people who go to the mall to buy jewelry. But if that's not your model, then what you want to do is you want to tell a story, because that piece of jewelry means so much more when you give it to somebody and you can tell the story of the artist or the story of the creation. So it just adds value. So I would be telling those stories about a specific piece that I might create, or maybe it's a story about what happens behind. So I might have two different types of email newsletters or combine them into one thing where I tell the history and the inspiration of a piece, and then also where they can buy it, whether I sell it online or talk about some of the local vendors, local businesses that do sell it. So that might be one of the ways that I would approach it.
Just to kind of counter that too, if you say your business, if you're in a different vein, and you have a service or a product that's really high value, that's complex, email is a great way to kind of warm people up, because obviously people are not going to go straight to you in that case. They're going to take time to really learn about what your product is or what your service is. So I like to think of email too as a way to kind of like butter people up, warm them up, to have that larger conversation, so that it's not just, you're not throwing everything at them at once.
And what about the opposite of that? I'm thinking email is a good way if I'm more of a complicated service, or I'm a service. Yep. I'm not a product.
Yep.
As to how to explain what I'm doing, because in social media there's some businesses that it's really hard to get across the point of what you do and what you're offering in 10 seconds.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think it can play a role throughout the customer journey, if that's what we're getting at. And sometimes for a service, it may be about explaining what you do or explaining the value. Very often what we do is we tell people exactly what we do. Like, we don't have any secrets. We're like, here's how you do this, here's how you do that. And most times, because they're like, I don't have time to do that, I'm just going to hire people to do that. Whether it's you or somebody else. So I think that there's that piece of it as well. And also I think it's about, especially small independently owned businesses, a lot of the reason why we build up loyalty, like I mentioned Anthony's earlier and Tony, the way he always makes me feel good when I walk in there, is those personal relationships. So if you're in a situation where some of your brand equity is who you are or who your team is, I think being able to tell those stories through email as well is really important. And I just started working with this meat delivery system. I'm sure they have a better name for it. But it's this ranch out west, and they ship meat products, yak, beef, all these different things across the country. Of course, there's these giant factory ranches out there. That's not what they are. They're a small mom and pop shop. They can only raise and sell so much beef and yak over the course of the year. But they tell stories about the guy who runs the ranch. They tell stories about themselves, and that increases the value. Because again, just like jewelry, it's like if I have a party over and I'm able to tell a story about how this was raised and the names of the people who raised it, suddenly that's a much more interesting dinner conversation. And
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people want to buy into those experiences, so I think that's also, email can be a great channel for being able to do that.
And I mean, there's the old saying, people will want to work with people that they can relate to, that they can identify with in some way. So getting your story out there, email is a perfect way to do that.
And so that touches on the locally owned independent business side of this. So you both work with local businesses, whether that's here or, in out west or wherever, or big national, organizations as well. What's the difference? How am I doing email marketing different when I'm a local independent business of, 10 employees or less, or even a single person?
I think that goes even beyond the email campaign. I think it's really
Sure.
understanding who your brand, what your brand is, who you serve, who your audience is, what they want from you, and then email just becomes one specific channel for it. So, we do have a couple of larger clients that have national or global reaches, and their emails tend to be very specific around the products and services that they offer. There's not a real human vibe there. It's not like, love Tracy at the end of the email or something like that,
Creepy,
which is
right?
fine, because that's not what they're looking for if you're on the receiving end of that email. But then there's other people that we work with, or that I subscribe to their email newsletters, because that's how I keep on top of these things, where it is very personal. And I think a lot of individual coaches and consultants have those emails where it doesn't even look like an email newsletter. It just looks like they're emailing you, which is a whole nother approach to doing this. But again, I really think it's about just providing the value that builds those relationships with people. One of the things about social is you're just throwing it out into the world, and people may engage with it for sure, but for email, you can send out those emails to people who have said, I want to hear from you. And then you can have that offer at the end, the call to action, which may be nothing more than hit reply and let me know what you're up to. And I remember I used to get this email from a guy, Chris Brogan, and he would always start with what he was drinking that morning, and somehow he always had a new drink every single time he sent out his Sunday morning email, and then he'd be hit reply and let me know what you're drinking. And I know from talking to him, he would literally get hundreds of people replying to him to say what he was drinking, and that started to build up relationships with people he ultimately wanted to work with.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you covered most of it, but with our smaller clients who have a smaller team, more of a niche product, definitely I feel like we use email as a creative expression for them, a way to really sort of reinforce their brand. For the larger clients, a lot of them really like to explore thought leadership within emails. They may have a longer form blog posted on their website, but you can always tease that in an email and make people click over and want to read more. There are lots of options. It's appropriate for, I think, any size business.
So what service should I be using nowadays? There's so many.
I'm fairly agnostic. Like, I don't think that there's one right one for everybody. These days, we're mostly putting clients on MailChimp who don't have a choice, because it's easy to get into, it's pretty simple to use, it's pretty powerful, and there are some nice testing and reporting tactics to it. If we have clients who are in e-commerce, then we tend to put them on Klaviyo. It's a little bit more expensive. I'm not sure that's how you pronounce it. I've never heard it correctly. We don't even agree in the office how you pronounce it. But it has some additional features for if you put something in your shopping cart and you don't purchase. Klaviyo has some nice tools built in where it will send you an email and say, hey, we noticed that you did. And then you can put in deals like, we noticed you didn't buy it yet. We'll give you 10% off if you purchase today.
Yeah.
So, and pro tip, if you want to buy something online these days, I would actually leave it in your shopping cart and wait a day or two if you're not in a rush to see if the company will send you a discount. But anyways.
I'm pretty agnostic as well. I think if you're not looking to, have a really powerful CRM program tied to your email program, then MailChimp, Constant Contact are both great tools. Those are the ones that I have the most experience working with. For clients that are looking to tie in performance metrics from their digital ad campaigns or social or something like that, then I would definitely recommend putting them into HubSpot or SharpSpring, which is very expensive, but there are benefits to how you can kind of manage to marry all of your tactics and your channels together and kind of get a more large-scale picture of your performance as a whole, rather than just your emails.
Yeah, we actually we've been too busy, but 2 years ago we actually decided we were going to get off MailChimp. Nothing wrong with MailChimp, but go to ActiveCampaign because we wanted to have more of a CRM. And then it's been the craziest 3 years I've ever been in business. So it's still on our to-do list, but ultimately we're going to be moving over to ActiveCampaign because it does have some of those additional CRM features.
Definitely. And I would also advise that if you do plan on expanding or utilizing a CRM, make sure you kind of make that investment early, because I have a client right now that has 2 CRMs. So they have MailChimp, and then they also have their native CRM that they were using before they started working with us. And having to ask our programmers to try to tie any lead gen form submissions to both CRMs, they were like, no, please don't do that. So it can cause a lot of complications later. So definitely, if you are looking to go in that direction, it may be wise to make an investment up front.
And just in case anybody doesn't know what CRM is, it's a customer relationship management. So it just has you can take those people and there'll be individual kind of reports or records for each one. So if you have a more robust sales process, then you can kind of see. Some of these will actually track how often they come back to the website. You can track which salespeople have reached out to them, how often they're getting your emails, did they opt out of things. So there's a lot of more data in there if you have a more complex sales process. But if you're just getting started, I always say crawl before you walk, walk before you run.
Exactly.
MailChimp, Constant Contact, and really if you have a platform that you're happy with right now, don't change. There's no need to change. So just because we may happen to put new people on these platforms doesn't mean they're necessarily better than what you have, or it's worth learning yet another piece of software.
So I think my biggest issue, and we use MailChimp for Portland Buy Local, is one, getting people to open the emails, whether that's because I'm not putting content they want to read, or because it's bouncing back or going to spam. So those are two things. So maybe we start with the spam. How do I keep my emails out of their spam filter?
Spam has changed a lot in the past 10 to 15 years. It used to be never use these words, free, and then every variation of free and stuff like that. I don't believe that's really the case anymore. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of the emails end up going into junk or the dreaded Gmail promotions tab just because they're coming from something like Constant Contact and MailChimp, and that's what happens. I talked to a friend of mine who's super smart in these ways, and he said, I wasn't getting your emails. I happened to see them in my junk, our email newsletters. And he gave us, and I wish I remembered this, and I'll get it and you can share it on the,
okay.
But it's the way that you set up how you're sending out your emails through a system like Constant Contact or MailChimp that actually greatly increases the chances it ends up in somebody's inbox or even promotions tab rather than going into the junk folder. The default way that most of these mail programs work is not that. So you may need to get a developer involved and have them tweak a few of the things on the back, and I wish I was smart enough to remember what this was, but
DKIM or DMARC?
it may be, but I don't want to go on the record saying yes.
Yeah.
But yeah, as soon as we made that switch, we got better delivery rates. So I'll find that out, I'll share it with you, and you can share it with the
Yeah,
audience.
we can put it in the notes on the YouTube.
All right, sounds good.
So that people, then we'll share it widely. I don't know, MailChimp might see it there.
Right. But also on the, you want to start with spam, so we'll start with spam.
Yes, if you do anything more to say about spam.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my previous wisdom would have said avoid too sales-focused language and emails, because that can seem spammy and get picked up in the spam filter. But now, we just try to make sure that our send reputation is good. So when you're building your list of email addresses to send emails to, Some companies will try to purchase lists of customers, which a lot of times that can really disrupt your send reputation, and your email platform should tell you what your score is. And so as long as you're delivering emails to people's inboxes, they're not immediately deleting them, then that typically will bode well for deliverability in the future. So just keep an eye on those things as you're sending out emails, and don't purchase lists if you can help it, because that can complicate things.
All right, so now to the how do I get them to open it when they do get it and they do see it?
That's more complicated, because I think, so we actually sent a survey to some of our customers recently, and we asked them to talk about why they wouldn't open an email in their inbox, and they were very honest. And they said that a lot of times they'll give people their junk email address, like that's the one they'll put into the website if they're signing up for an email newsletter, because they want the gated content offer, or they want something that's behind that email wall. So that's one thing that's challenging, and I think you just have to sort of put your best foot forward in those top funnel tactics, your digital marketing, your social. Make sure that they're engaged with your brand even before you start sending them emails, because then they're more likely to open the emails in the end. But content's important too. So like put your best foot forward at the very top of your emails as well. Make sure you pick good subject lines. Make sure that you have some splashy visuals that will grab people's attention, really good informational headlines, things like that. And don't do a wall of text. That's a big thing. Walls of text never bode well. So, keeping it to 2 or 3 sentences, then a call to action that will lead off to your website if you're doing, say, a list of articles for a newsletter or something like that. Or if you're describing a product, then have them click over to the website. That usually helps.
I'll tell you what doesn't work. May newsletter.
Yeah.
No one wants to read a May newsletter,
No.
right? So I think whenever I see that and I'm talking to a client, I'm like, at least tell me what I'm getting. I think the 2 email subject lines that tend to work the best is either explaining exactly why they should open this newsletter. Maybe it's free shipping, 20% off, spring sale, whatever it may be. And the other one is the opposite, not telling them what they're getting. Having the information gap where they have to open that email to actually find out what you're talking about. That can actually get a lot of really good open rates. And for years, and I know this is probably still true, the best open rate email I ever sent, the subject line was Tuesday, ? And basically everybody opened it because they were like, do I have something with Rich on Tuesday? And it was like, I just wanted to make sure you knew that Tuesday was the last day of early bird discounts for the Agents of Change conference, right? They may have hated me after they got that, but a few people sent something and they're like, you're a jerk, but I will buy those tickets. But I think it's like those 2 ways. So either be really upfront with why they should open it, or give them that information gap, because we all need to fill that information gap, and it's just a matter of clicking it. Also on those subject lines, just keep in mind, like you may even want to, when you're testing it, pull up your mobile phone and check it out, because it's a very short a small amount of characters that will fit. So you really want to put those up front. Also on MailChimp and some of these other platforms, you can do A/B split tests on subject lines. So you might try 2 different subject lines, and what they'll do is they'll send 25% out for subject line A, 25% out with subject line B, and whatever one wins, the last 50% gets that like a few hours later. So that could be another thing. I'd play around with emojis. Sometimes they work, sometimes they end up in the junk folder. So it really, it's about playing around with it. But I think the most important thing is, even though I talked about it's like you get, like there's so little distraction in the inbox, there's still a lot of other emails. And you want your email to stand out from all those others. And so play around with timing. Like I never send out overnight emails, because I know when I get into the office, there's 96 emails in my inbox, and I'm just trying to get rid of them as quickly as possible. Where if the same email came in later in the day, I might have the bandwidth to be like, I wonder what that sale is all about, or I wonder what they're talking about, and then I'd open that email.
Exactly. Yeah, we and most email platforms will tell you sort of the times of day or the days of the week that you get the most opens. So then you can start to logic your way through and be like, all right, if I send this email at 11 a.m. on a Wednesday, then I'll get more opens for whatever reason.
Just curious about what's a good open rate?
Yeah.
You
Good
can
question.
Google this and they'll say it and they'll tell you by industry. If I get 20% to 25%, I'm feeling pretty good about myself.
Yep.
The longer your email list is, both both in terms of how long it's been around and how many people are on it, I think that percentage goes down. Because we all have that kind of thing where I don't even see certain emails that I'm still subscribed to anymore. I just hit delete, but I don't want to actually unsubscribe, especially if it was a past client of mine. I don't want to make them feel bad, or a current client of mine. But you just stop paying attention to them. So I think you should expect a certain amount of churn in your list. And I'd even think about, there are campaigns you can do. I don't know if you can do it on MailChimp, where if somebody hasn't opened up an email in 6 months, you can create an audience of people who haven't engaged with you in 6 months, and send them out an email and say, look, it doesn't seem like you're getting much out of this email newsletter. Click here to let me know that you want to stay on. Otherwise, I'm going to free up your inbox. And then literally you can just clean them out, and that will increase your open rate, which some people claim, and I'm not smart enough to know this, that it will actually increase your deliverability rate as well.
Yep.
Like the more opens you get, it actually leads to a better delivery rate.
Yep. All of that is true.
Okay.
Yeah,
Ellen's
so-
smarter than me, so make sure you...
But yeah, 20 to 25% is typically the metric we'd give for just our general client base. For our higher ed clients, it's a little higher just because typically those leads are super engaged. But yeah, so that's kind of a niche thing.
The best open rate you'll probably ever get is your welcome email.
Yes.
So make sure you don't use the generic MailChimp or Constant Contact welcome to our community email, and instead make sure it's filled with your brand voice.
Definitely.
So I'll ask one more question, and then I'll open it up to the folks online, and then as well as those here. So subscribers. So we've been talking a lot about how do we get people to open, the ones that are already getting our emails. What about the people that aren't getting our emails? How do we get them to subscribe?
We love to do gated content. We don't have too many e-commerce clients, but we do have a lot of clients that have very complex products and services. And so for them, we always would do a gated content tactic. So yeah, you put together a PDF that has something of value that you're communicating to your potential customers, and then make them put in their email address to download it. And that's a super effective way.
I definitely agree with the gated content, both maybe having a global piece of content that you can only get by giving your email address, as well as maybe ones that are specific to particular blog posts or podcasts or videos you have on your website. If you do have e-commerce, store discounts work really well. I hate to say this, but those annoying pop-ups are incredibly effective at getting email subscribers.
Yes, they are.
But at the same time, it depends on your business, as always. And I'm not a fan of ones that pop up as soon as you get to a homepage.
Yep.
Because it's kind of like when I used to walk into this discount furniture store that will remain nameless, and 4 sales reps would immediately jump on me and pull me, limb from limb, being like, "Can we help you?" That's
car.
not what you want. So you can set up a lot of these pop-ups to only appear after 20 or 30 seconds of being on a page, or when they've reached a second page. That's when you might say, "Hey, we've got some great content for you. Would you like to sign up?" Join our newsletter is not a good reason for anybody to sign up for your newsletter. So you have to give them something in exchange for them to be able to do it.
Yeah.
And the other thing we found that works well is webinars, even though everybody's tired of webinars and everybody has Zoom fatigue. But putting on webinars and getting them to sign up and having it somewhere in the small print that says, you'll be added to our mailing list, you can unsubscribe at any time, we found that to be effective as well.
Yeah, definitely I second the pop-up comment, because those have been really, really high performing for us when we played around with those. I do have to share one anecdote though, because way back in the day when I first started to dip my toes in the marketing world, I started a food blog mainly to teach myself how to do digital marketing. And so I downloaded Hotjar, which is a UX analysis tool, just to see how people were interacting with my website. And I realized that I was getting a lot of rage clicks on this one page. That people were like trying to click off. It was very enthusiastically trying to get this pop-up to go away. And I realized that the X was hidden. And so these poor people are coming to my website and having to deal with this perpetual pop-up form that wouldn't go away. So pay attention to those things too if you're gonna
I've never heard of rage click, but I've definitely experienced it.
Yeah, no, it is a thing on Hotjar, rage clicks. Yeah. So
I think you've created a new term.
Yep. So don't make your audience rage click, please.
All right, so why don't we open up to questions? Let's go first to a question in the room.
Let's use the mic. Just so
Oh, yes. And use the mic so that those at home can hear you.
Thanks. Thanks for being here. This has been really helpful. A couple of questions. One, do either of you have any experience with Keep, which used to be Infusionsoft? It's a
No, we've used Infusionsoft for some of our clients, more for contact forms that then lead to, because Infusionsoft is a CRM, very expensive and high-end one. But again, I don't have any specific experience with Keep. A lot of these platforms are very similar, though.
It's marketed to our industry very heavily. I'm in a house cleaning business, and
Okay.
Keep is all over it, so it's interesting. The other one is email campaigns for recruitment for employees. Have either of you done any of that, and could you comment on how they might be different?
Definitely. We've done quite a bit of it. And I would say that they have been pretty effective overall, especially in promoting your company culture. Email is a great way to do that versus giving people too much, information overload. It's just a great way to tell like employee stories, highlight the fun things that you guys may do in a day, like, a team building exercise that you engaged in, something like that. But we definitely have done several recruitment campaigns that have been successful, and we just have tried to make sure to keep it on that line of talking about culture rather than going into too many nitty-gritty details. But it's a great way, again, to just, in a longer form way, tell your story.
It's really funny, in the past few months, I've gotten about a third of the inquiries coming into our company for digital marketing are not about lead gen or sales, they're about recruitment, because we're all feeling the same pain points right now. And it's actually interesting, I hadn't thought about adding email marketing to that mix, because usually it's about ads and getting in front of people. But I do think that there's a really good role for this, and I would probably lean heavily into maybe an auto drip campaign where you give people a reason to sign up, and then there's an automated list of 3, 5, 7, whatever the right number is for you, emails that go out automatically that you've pre-written. So it could be going through just what Ellen was saying about, here's why you want to work here, here's the company culture, here's some photos from when we went to the Sea Dogs as a team, whatever it may be, just to really paint that picture as you as an employer of choice.
Yep. And also the way that we've organized it, so if somebody looking for a job comes to our client's website, we always make sure to include at least some sort of a panel within the homepage that will lead them directly to a careers page where then they can put in their email. And a lot of times it'll be like, put in your email so that you can keep receiving updates on potential openings or potential updates from the company, something like that. But just make sure that you have presence on your homepage, even for recruitment, if it's a really important piece of your overall tactical plan. Definitely super important to keep that as visible as possible. And we've had a lot of success with it. And I think too, in terms of lead quality, and not to look at potential employees as leads, but in terms of the quality of people who will engage with you after receiving your recruitment emails, typically is a bit higher. They're more seriously interested.
Do you have anything online, Pete? Any questions?
Yeah, we do that first, or
Yeah.
keep going?
Yeah, why don't we do one online so we can feel like they're not being ignored. We know you're there.
Okay, a question that came in was, please explain drip campaign.
Okay, so a drip campaign is essentially set up to, in essence, similar to the way I described the marketing funnel. So you'd start out with a piece of information in your email that's more general, and then you would kind of keep honing to make that prospect take a specific action. So typically we keep drip campaigns to about 5 emails because you don't want to overload people with tons of content. But the idea is that you are slowly educating them, giving them more information so that hopefully that will lead up to them becoming a customer, whether that's reaching out and contacting you, whether that's purchasing something from your website, whatever your business is. It's just basically designed to sort of funnel that person in that direction to becoming a customer. And you always want, when you're setting up a drip campaign, to still have a call to action on every email, even if you know somebody's not going to take action immediately. You still want them to be able to have that option at sort of all stages of the campaign. I don't know if that's...
No, I think you did. That's exactly what it is. So you can write them up. It's triggered. It's triggered by somebody subscribing to your email newsletter, where we talked about Klaviyo earlier, where it might be triggered by somebody putting something in their cart and not buying, or triggered by somebody not engaging with your email for 6 months. So there's different ways, but that's really how you do it. You set up a trigger, and the trigger in this case might be signing up for your email newsletter. Well, your next email newsletter may not come out for a month. depending on how you send them out. So here's something that you can get right in front of somebody when they're thinking about you, and you stay in front of them, show them new homes if you're a realtor. You know, it's like, this just came on the market. Actually, that's a terrible example because you don't want to have to touch it once you've created it. But you might say something like, here are the schools in Scarborough, or here's the local restaurants in Scarborough, if that person has shown interest in Scarborough. And there's a lot more, we didn't even really touch on it, that's happening with programmatic emails, where not just are you pulling in somebody's name, but based on the activity they took on your website, you might say, we know you're interested in Scarborough and the surrounding areas, or Portland and the surrounding areas. Here are some local restaurants. Here's what the school system's like. Here's what this is like, just so you can educate them. And again, set yourself up as an authority, set yourself up as a trusted advisor, whatever your business may be.
Drip, and I just thought of this, drip campaigns are also really effective if that person has already been a customer and you want them to come back. So I actually just this morning, I was like, fate or something, but I got into a drip campaign from Uncommon Paws because I just made a purchase there. And so now they're sending me emails, and how long will it take me to come back in the store to buy more things for my dog? Probably not that long. But the point being is that even after somebody has made a purchase or worked with you, you still want them to keep interested. And so a drip campaign is a great way to sort of post-purchase bring them back into that interest circle.
Especially if that product maybe has multiple uses. So you could, if somebody bought a piece of software from you, you could have a series of emails that go out that kind of talk about some of the things they may not know about it, or new ways to use that piece of software or physical product, whatever it may be, just to, again, build that relationship and build that loyalty with your customer base.
All right. I think I saw, Jen, you have a question, right? You want to grab the mic somewhere, wherever it went. There you go.
During the pandemic, I was really good about sending emails out, maybe too good, like once a week, and I got feedback. It was only from one customer. She was like, listen, if you keep sending emails this often, I'm going to have to unsubscribe. And I was like, oh. So one person, grain of salt, good feedback, like what would you?
But that's a good question. How often do you send?
Yeah. I'd say that's great feedback. And it gives you an idea, metric for how much tolerance your customers have for numbers of emails. We typically will not send more than one email a week. If it is the beginning of a drip campaign for a major promotion for a client, then we may do twice a week at first, just for the first 2 emails. But then subsequently, we really don't try not to send more than once a week, if that. If it's a newsletter, bi-weekly to monthly. You don't want to spam people too much with emails, and people have different levels of tolerance. It depends on how engaged they are with your brand too. So you can kind of make decisions based on the pacing of other tactics you have going on or other channels that you're managing. Then you can send more frequently, but just try to sort of morph it and gauge it depending on how active you are with other tactics.
I believe if you're not pissing off some people with your marketing, you're probably not marketing hard enough, but a lot of people think I'm a jerk because of that, so take it with a grain of salt. I would say, so one thing that you could do, and this person may be right, maybe it's too often, but the other thing is maybe you could create a monthly recap email that she could subscribe to instead. And so that might be an option. And very often when I've unsubscribed from an email newsletter for whatever reason, there'll be a page that says, would you just like to receive fewer emails from us? Usually the answer is no, I don't want any of your emails. But the bottom line is, for that person who still wants to hear from you, maybe there could be like, I will basically summarize all of my new content once a month, and if you'd prefer to get the digest, click here. And there's usually ways to set that up within your email service provider.
Yep.
Any other questions online?
Any more in the room? Okay, one of the questions was, what is CRM?
Oh, a customer relationship management system. So basically, it allows you to take in a potential customer's contact information, their email address, their name, sometimes their physical address. And it basically is a piece of software that creates a library of these customers that you're engaging with. And like Rich was saying, you can track whether your sales reps have engaged with them. You can track calls a lot of times. You can track how many emails they've opened, what content they've engaged with. A lot of times you can track how many times they visited your website or what content on your website they've interacted with. So it's basically just a way to keep records of what engagements you've had with your customers.
And it's another way to segment as
Yeah,
well, which
absolutely.
we haven't really kind of touched on by saying these people might want this or these people might want this, but maybe just address that really quickly is how you should be segmenting your list so that you don't have to send the email every week to one person, but you can send more often or different content.
So segmenting is, I think, very, very, very important. Just because it allows you to kind of tailor the content within your emails to specific customers' needs. And you'll hear me preach this all day because I'm the persona development girl at my company. So they're like, oh, please stop talking about segmenting. But it's true. There are particular groups of your customers that have things in common, whether it's common needs, common motivations that you can kind of stick together within a list, tailor an email sequence or just one email or even your newsletter to kind of address those needs and those motivations. And then they're much more likely to engage with that content because they're super interested in it. So it's also a good way to learn more about your customers. So it kind of goes both ways.
So I'm so glad you said that because we've agreed on everything so far today, and this is boring. So I will say that I've talked to so many. For years when I was talking about email marketing, I'm like, you have to segment. But we never did. Like we did, but we sent out the same email to everybody anyways because we're busy. And I talked to a bunch of email marketing specialists, and I'm like, so how do you segment your lists? And they're like, we really don't segment our lists at all. And it's a lot of work to segment the list. I did have an interview on my podcast recently with somebody because we were talking about it, like the last thing I want to do when I sign up for an email newsletter is tell them exactly what I'm interested in. So how else do you segment? And what she does is, as she's writing about maybe one or two different things, she can track where people click. So if you click on link for product A, then she knows you may be interested in A and other things, and she sends out other ones. But it may be just a one-off email to that group rather than creating all these different segments. The bigger your subscriber base is, maybe the more sense it makes to segment that list. But it's also one of those things, if we're doing the walk before you run thing, I would say segmentation is almost flying.
Yeah. So I will put a caveat that depending on what your business is, you may not have individual personas that you're working with, in which case, like you said, segmenting is totally not necessary. But if you can identify distinct groups of your customers, then it may be a good idea to explore that a little bit. And like I said, if the content lift is too heavy with that, definitely think about repurposing some of your content from social or your website to make it a little bit easier to segment. But I definitely, maybe it's just my nerdy psychology brain that loves to get to the core of what makes people tick. I'm like, yes, this is fun. Love segmenting.
But I will say, things like MailChimp, even though we're talking about there's more powerful CRMs, it still has some of CRM type options, and it is easy. And I would say if you can segment between current customers and just subscribers, or just there might be just a few levels that you could segment by.
I would say it's great if you can do it, but it is a heavy lift. And I don't want anybody to not get into email marketing because they're like, oh, I have to segment my list and I don't know how. That is something that don't even think about when you're just getting started. But if you find that it's going to increase sales or whatever the case may be then you can try it on down the road.
And just to give an example of one type of segmentation that one of our clients uses, they're a banking client, and so they have different email lists for people interested in specific services. So if your company offers several different services, then that's when you could say, oh, I want to bring this person into a mortgage-related drip campaign or a HELOC-related drip campaign, something like that. So you can keep those needs separate rather than just sending them one massive email that tries to cover all of those bases, because that's really not going to appeal to as many people.
Other questions in the room?
So I'm sitting here thinking about this concept of using email marketing for recruitment. And one thing that occurred to me
You're not the only one, so go. A lot of our members do that.
But one thing that occurred to me is, so you've got a drip campaign, somebody signed up to receive updates about open positions or whatever. What happens when they end up applying for a job and then they get hired? They're still getting these emails that are like, oh, it'd be great to work here. You know, like, so how do you modify the campaign based on they've taken an action now?
Yeah.
So they're in a different group.
So most CRMs will allow you to remove somebody from an email sequence if they take a specific action. So if they've applied, then your CRM should automatically be able to remove them from the list so they don't keep getting those emails. We do this a lot with people who are going to use a service one time and we don't want to keep sending them emails. So they, go see a virtual tour or something like that, or if they sign up to, we have an assisted living client, so if somebody applies to be a part of that community, they're removed from that drip campaign because they've, the focus is different now. So you can absolutely set up your CRM to do that.
Now, a CRM versus, so that wouldn't be like a Constant Contact or a MailChimp?
You can do that with Constant Contact. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, we talk about all these fancy CRMs, and Constant Contact and MailChimp are primarily email marketing platforms that have the capabilities of a CRM to some degree. So you can still set up sequences to take specific contacts out, to filter by an action that they've taken. So they'll still do that.
And a lot of these auto drip campaigns have a limited number of emails
Yes.
you're sending out, so they'll
That too.
kind of age out of them after a few days
Yeah.
or weeks anyway.
Yeah, I remember when I first set up my food blog, I came up with an email sequence that was like 15 emails long. And so you realize after a while that, people lose interest, they've gotten what they need to from the business. And so then that's when you can sort of dial back the number of emails that you send. So we try to keep things within 5 to 7, just in case for some reason our CRM misses someone and doesn't filter them out, then at least, they'll just stop receiving emails after a certain point.
And one thing we really haven't touched on, though, is all of these email service providers have some sort of form of reporting.
Yes.
And so one of the things that's helpful is go in there, take a look at your open rate, your click rate, whatever else you want to measure, your unsubscribe rate, and that can give you more information too about, are you sending out emails the right amount, the right time, all these sorts of things. We should always, as marketers or as business owners, be looking at our analytics to help us make better decisions going forward. And email is part of that decision-making process.
Yeah, big analytics fan here.
Other questions, Pete, online or in person here?
One from the beginning, the email marketing newsletter that you couldn't pronounce, they were asking for the spelling.
Klavio,
Okay.
Clavio.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is so helpful. All of these programs Portland Buy Locals put on are just incredible. So thank you for that. I have a quick question about unsubscribers. So I'm just going to tell you what I do in case you can catch on to this. So my heart is broken when I see people unsubscribe from my newsletter. And I think it keeps me from sending newsletters out. So I don't send many newsletters out. I have over 1,000 people in my newsletter system. I have a 60 to 70% open rate. And then I try not to look at the unsubscribers, but I do. I use Aweber. It's a very stressful process for me. And I would like to send out at least 2 newsletters a month, and I would like to gear up so that I'm creating some kind of a drip campaign to launch a new product that's an online product at the end of the summer. So not just for local customers, but because I have some national and international people on my list. So unsubscribers and also advice on what I may be doing right or may be doing wrong.
Well, having not read your newsletter, I don't know what you're doing right or wrong. I will say I understand the feeling about unsubscribes. It brings me back to high school when I had to sit by myself at the lunch table. A lot of bad memories there. But you got to get over it, is the short version. It's a mindset thing, and you've got to recognize that people need you, and then they don't. And that's okay. That's part of business. You are serving a need. You get them to a certain point, and then they just don't need you or don't need to hear from you as frequently. And we've all gone through those phases where I'm like, I am unsubscribing from just about everything, right? It's not personal about that. It's not providing them value. That's totally fine. I think you just have to let that go. I think you're not doing your audience service by being afraid of sending out emails more frequently. is what I'd say. And I think if you start sending them out, your business will grow, word of mouth will grow, you'll come up with new reasons why people should subscribe, and overall your list will grow. But be okay with the fact that, people are going to unsubscribe when they don't need that service anymore, and it's no reflection on you.
And P.S. your open rates are 3 times.
Oh,
what
your
the average
open rates are
your open rates are great.
disgustingly good.
Yeah.
Disgusting.
Yeah, that's
I'm
great.
offended by how good they are.
Yeah, you have no idea. No, you do now. But no, it's tough because I felt the same exact way when I first started doing my food blog. And I think it's worse because like a lot of times I'm working on clients' emails. So there is a layer of separation. Like I want my clients to be successful, but it's a business that you're running and you own is so personal to you. So when you see people leaving your list, it's like, oh no.
Right.
But like Rich said, just don't take it to heart. And the fact that you have great open rates, and if you are able to continue to pour that creativity into your newsletter and really thoughtfully build it, the right people will pick up on that.
I think you also might consider sending out an email to your list today, not necessarily today, but saying that like I'm going to be increasing the frequency of these email newsletters, but I'm also going to set up a digest. So if you only want to hear from me once a month or once a quarter, click here to get on the digest. Otherwise, expect to hear from me once a week, once every 2 weeks, whatever feels right for you. Or survey them and say, would you like to hear from me more often?
Surveys are awesome. Definitely would recommend that too if you're not sure what kind of content your subscribers want to receive. Surveys are great. Also, if your CRM or your email platform is able to show you the specific links in your email newsletter that people are interacting with, then you can get a better idea of where the most interest is and then respond. The other thing I would say, sorry, I have too many suggestions, is setting up an email editorial calendar. That's really helpful too, because that helps keep you organized. Once you learn what your audience wants to read about, then if you set up that editorial calendar, then that takes kind of the thinking out of having to do that once every month or twice every month, depending on how long or how frequently you want to send out emails. So I always recommend to clients who are handling their own email content development to set up an editorial calendar.
Do we have
One more online.
One more online? Okay.
My website has an email list that I can send from and track. What is the benefit of using MailChimp versus the embedded one?
I don't know that there is one, quite
Yeah.
honestly. If it's working great,
Yep.
don't change.
Yeah.
If it's not working great, or if you want some additional functionality, like some of the things we talked about today, Drip Campaign, CRM, that you don't get from whatever your website platform is, then you can investigate other ones. But yeah, I'm not going to suggest that you go changing for something that's working for you.
Yeah, I would agree.
Anyone else in the room have a question?
Could you throw at the top maybe 3 things that people that are extremely busy, marketing is not our only job, we have tons of things on our plates, what we should pay attention to?
I'm just going to repeat that since she didn't have it. What are the top 3 things that those of us that are really busy and wear many hats should be doing with our email marketing?
With email marketing or with all your marketing?
All would be great.
All or email? Okay. Let's stick with email.
I would have some sort of gated content or link or email bait to get people to subscribe to the email. I would be working on having really intriguing subject lines to get people to open. And I would focus on having just one call to action on your email, or one main one on your email, to get them from your inbox to your website or landing page to take a desired action.
Yeah, I definitely would agree with all of those things. Make it as easy as possible on yourself, and like I said before, repurpose your content if you need to. If you need to work with a copywriter, you can find tons of them online. If it's just quick, if you need them to set up a quick sequence for you or work on your monthly newsletter, it may be worth doing that. But before you do that, again, walk before you run. Just repurpose or keep your emails really short that link off to your website. So that way you're not trying to write content for both places, because that can be really overwhelming to a lot of people too. Content development's hard. It's really hard. So just be patient with yourself and do as much with as little as possible.
Can I open up a can of worms on this last question that we have? Sure. Depending on what kind of email you're doing, like promoting a blog post or podcast, you could take that content drop it into ChatGPT.
Yep.
I was so,
That too.
I almost was gonna
And
say
ask
that.
it to write an email for you with 3 great subject lines. With that being said, I would still make sure that, I mean, I'm not recommending this, but you asked for some quick things.
Yes.
Because ChatGPT is not your brand voice. So just be aware of that, although you can do advanced things like create personas and whatever. But that might be one way, like if you struggle with what's the email subject line that I should use that will get the most opens, you could just turn to ChatGPT,
Yep.
copy and paste the email if you've written out the email and say, how should I, give me 5 subject lines.
It's so
and it
true.
will.
I've done that, and it's a really great, even idea generator.
Yeah. Yep.
Right, sometimes I like it just to kind of get the creative juices flowing,
Yep.
even though I like to think I'm a better writer than ChatGPT.
All the copywriters are throwing rotten vegetables at their computer screens right now.
Listen, I love to write,
Yep.
and I use it
If you
for
want
those
Rich's
kind of
email, I
things.
can give it to you. No, I'm
Right,
just
yeah.
I mean, full disclosure, I'm an English and history double major, so with all of this ChatGPT stuff, I was like, oh no, all the writers, what are they gonna do? But I have found it to be very helpful because we have, quite a pithy email newsletter that we do at Vaunt, and ChatGPT has been invaluable for just helping us think of, okay, how do we want to present the 3 latest blog articles that we've published to our audience within this email newsletter, just in a quick, bite-sized paragraph, literally a bite-sized paragraph. And it's, a lot of times we'll have to do some tweaking and rearranging, but it is really helpful and it's a lot faster.
And for those of you that don't know what ChatGPT is, it's an AI tool. So it's not a person, it's a computer that's generating content for you. So I guess we'll leave it at that. That's, thank you, Kim. That was basically what I was going to say, is do a rapid fire session. So thank you for everyone for coming. Thank you for those that are online. This will be available on our YouTube page for free at a later date. You can find all of our older sessions there as well, also for free. Share them, and we will be quiet for the summer, at least as this event goes, and we'll be coming back in September for the next edition of IndieBiz EDU. And thank you again, Gorham Savings Bank, for getting this going and sponsoring all of our events this whole year. So have a great summer. Thank you. Thanks.